Hey, how's it going? It's your boy, Challenger Coach Adam Mobalytics here to bring you the 10.5 low-elo update and Q&A video, so let's jump right into it. Starting out in the top lane, our S-tier roster will be Garen, Darius, Mordekaiser, Set, and Fiora. For changes, these set nerfs were clearly not enough to stop this monster of a champion who's able to 1v5 into the enemy backline as a viable strategy in teamfights while having amazing laning and 1v2 potential, along with his biggest lane counters and enchanter tops being removed. He's still the king, so we moved him from A tier to S tier. Keeping that in mind, with Shen's carry potential just being not anywhere close to Set's or the other S tier champions, we moved him down to A+, and added in Poppy and Zac to B tier as other viable tank options. Garen, though he isn't getting moved up or down or anything like that, is the best top laner in low elo by a huge margin. Like, it's not even close, to the point where I pretty much want to put him in Gare win tier at the moment because, you know, that's all he does. He just wins, so abuse him until the nerfs come. That means that the most important change this patch will be moving Mordekaiser from A tier to S tier. The meta right now is a bit of an arms race, with people just picking engage comps, which, you know, are primarily melee champions as a part of them. Mordekaiser, though, is a champion who is perfect for this, as his teamfight is amazing versus his style of comp, as he's able to dish out insane amount of AoE damage versus melee champions, and he's gonna kill at least one person per fight with his ultimate. Not to mention, the most annoying part about Mordekaiser is his laning phase, as there is barely any outplay potential in his kit. He doesn't even have any mana, and if he's stronger than you, even dodging his Q means he's probably still going to beat you 1v1. And if he can beat you 1v1, because of the way his ultimate works, even if you get a gank, he's just going to 1v2 that, especially since tank junglers are way more popular in low elo, and they don't even have the DPS to bring him down after he kills you in their ultimate. In the mighty jungle, our S tier roster will be quite a few champions. We got Master Yi, Trundle, Amumu, Zac, Warwick, Shyvana, and Echo. For the changes, we have Kayn moving down from A tier to B tier, as those buffs were not enough to make his terrible early game, you know, even passable. Maybe next buff, it'll be your time, Kayn. Hecarim is actually surprisingly making a comeback lately, so we added him to B tier. Well, he will stay or even potentially move up to A tier if the buffs on PBE to his ultimate CC make a big enough impact. Dragon Girl has historically been pretty strong in low elo, with her most dominating period being when Sated Devour was in the game, or, you know, maybe a close second to Pharaoh Flare, but both made her absurdly strong. Currently, Shyvana's AD build is making a comeback, but it's still not as strong as her wizard style, which is just one of the easiest and most fun ways to 1v9 a game from the jungle. That's because the AP style of Shyvana is currently one of the only true 1v9 jungle champions in low elo, along with stuff like Echo or Master Yi, who are still just gonna carry in the late game, even if they're not as strong early game. Once Shyvana hits 2 or 3 items, she just kinda ults in place and then becomes a fireball turret that is able to kill people in 2 shots of her E, which is, you know, kinda dumb because that ability is really easy to land. She might be considered a cheesy champion, but it's some good quality cheese, so pick her up for sure. Moving down to the mid lane, our S tier roster will be Diana, Fizz, Echo, and Katarina. For our mid lane changes, we have Kassadin moving down from S tier to A tier because those turret plate changes did help him, but it wasn't enough to make him super consistent in a meta that has so many AD options in the mid lane to counter him. Swain's popularity is dropping faster than Blizzard's, especially after Project A comes through, and funny enough, more of a support champion, so we dropped him from A tier to B tier. AP Wizard Cho'Gath is an up-and-coming anti-assassin pick in the mid lane that is pretty interesting with Glacial Augment, so we slotted him into B tier. The one change I would like to highlight this patch is Sylas moving from B tier to A tier. It's taken a bit of time for people to adjust to the mini rework of Sylas, as his playstyle is a lot different actually. His wave clear early game is almost as bad as Kassadin's, and with his ult CD being higher in the early to mid game, you gotta actually use your brain to choose which ultimate targets. It's even longer in the late game too. In terms of skill order though, due to all the melee champions and changes to him overall, people are now gonna max W and then E and then Q, because when you combine them with the passive changes, it's now gonna make him a lot easier to execute versus melee champions, and you don't even have to weave auto attacks in between every single ability anymore, making him, yeah, just easier to execute overall. We combine this with how many popular engage champions you can just hijack ultimates from, like Leona, Nautilus, or even Warwick from the jungle. The dude's a complete beast once he hits level 13. His team fighting is 1v9 status and is likely one of the best team fighting mid laners in the late game right now. For the bot lane S tier roster, we've got Jinx, Misfortune, Jhin, Caitlyn, Vayne, and Ezreal. For the changes, we only have 2 this time around, the first being moving Senna down from S tier to A tier. Yes, she is still incredibly strong, don't get me wrong, as a champion, but, you know, funny enough, she does better as a support in low elo, And the reason she's considered so strong in high-elo and in competitive play is because of the fasting center strat where she builds a support item from the AD role. Interestingly enough, doing that actually messes up a lot of the stat sites currently, and they have a hard time recognizing her as an AD or a support, which has actually caused Tom Kent to show up as one of the highest win rate AD carries, which, you know, is just kind of funny. The other change will be moving Ezreal from A tier to S tier, and before you flame me in the comment sections about this because you don't want more Ezreals on your team, hear me out. His win rate has climbed up a bit this patch, but his play rate is already at 30% and it just keeps going up, so people are already gonna pick him because he's such a high priority in high elo and competitive play due to his kiting versus dive comps being so valuable. So at this point, I might as well dish out some stats about him so people have less of a chance to feed on him when they're inevitably gonna pick him on your team. First up, Trinity Force outperforms Iceborne Gauntlet pretty much every single time, so please buy Trinity, stop with the Iceborne. Second, Conqueror is better for games that last longer, while Lethal Tempo is better for early laning phase and the mid game as well. So for people looking to stomp lane like in high elo and get that laning phase priority, you're gonna take the Lethal Tempo. But in low elo, where, you know, games last a little bit longer, Conqueror is performing a lot better, so try that out. Outside of that, I am sorry for all the off-roll Ezreals people are gonna have to deal with this patch, but there's nothing that I can say or do to stop people from doing it, but at least if they watch this video, they can build him properly and have a slightly higher chance to win. Last up before the Q&A section, we have the support S tier roster of Janna, Blitzcrank, Leona, Nami, and Senna. Taric is moving down from S tier to A tier as he isn't super blind pickable. He is a strong situational pick when you pair him with the proper AD carries, but outside of being a fantastic champion versus dive heavy comps or to counter things like Leona, he's not going to provide you with the consistency and wins that the other S tier champions are going to give you. El Bardo, due to his nerfs last patch, along with the nerf to mobility boots, really hurt his win rate and ability to 1v9 in low elo games as he can no longer rush Deadman's plate and mobility boots, run around like an idiot while still killing people 1v1, so we dropped him from A tier to B tier as he actually is a little bit harder now. That means that our last change in the update video will be moving Leona from A tier to S tier. We also debated moving Nautilus up to S tier along with her, as they are commonly seen as the same strength, and after the mobility boots didn't really hurt either, maybe it was about time. But actually, Leona is doing a lot better than Nautilus, and when I say a lot better, I mean 1.5% win rate better, which might not seem like a lot, but when Leona and Nautilus are some of the two most popular supports in the current meta, that 1.5% win rate actually means a lot more. Because of that, Leona can be considered the premier engaged support for solo queue, as her ability to chain CC someone and lock them down with her hilariously low CD on Q is incredibly impactful to meta with so many diving champions. Sure, Nautilus can do something similar, but a root on a longer cooldown than Nautilus' stun is just not the same. Starting up in the Q&A section, our first YouTube question will be from Stan N, who asked, why does Yuumi have a high skill cap? Only in terms of knowing how to lane, the rest is pretty easy. We actually get this question a lot, so I'm glad I can explain it here so I don't have to do it as often. Yumi's skill floor of staying attached to someone and kind of like, you know, doing nothing but healing and landing 1 out of every 4 Qs is what most people see in their games. Then sometimes her carries get fed and then she gets a win for free, and then, you know, she did pretty much nothing, kind of similar to Janna or Sona, and gets a free win. But in that case, Yumi's win rate should be a lot higher for how easy she is, because most easy champions that are strong at the moment, and Yuumi is definitely strong, have a high win rate. For example, Garen, that dude's just at the top of the win rate charts and he's really easy to execute. But Yuumi is sitting around 49% win rate. That's because, you know, that baseline of Yuumi performance that I mentioned where you got the AFK Yuumi style, that doesn't actually win games. Only proactive Yuumis actually win on a consistent basis. You know, the ones who are constantly looking for auto attacks, they detach and reattach without getting CC'd and died. They're ulting to engage, not to disengage. They know which teammates to attach to and not the ones to follow, and then they just die for free because they were being an idiot. And they're even good at roaming or providing vision control without having to be attached to someone the whole time, which is actually hard to do because your base movement speed is so low. So the truth is that, yeah, you're kind of right. She's hard to lane with and easy to play in the late game, but that doesn't make her an easy champion overall. In fact, it adds to her difficulty because the laning phase is probably the most important part of the game. Our next YouTube question comes from FlowerPower420, who asked, do you think we might see more melee champions replacing AD carries with the turret play changes? So actually what I think about on this topic is that with supports like Senna and Ewing being both strong and popular, it can definitely happen. Both of those champions are able to enable short range carries to actually play in the ball lane, so I wouldn't be surprised if things like Set, Garen, or even the new version of Wukong, and to a lesser extent something like Tryndamere, could be played in the bot lane versus passive laners like Ezreal. You can take it to a bigger extreme too, with champions like Leona and Taric being strong. Some cheesy kill lanes with Jarvan, Wukong, Rengar, Aurelia, stuff like that could be viable, and it could be fun to try out. You can also keep it a little bit more traditional with the Yasuo bot lane, who is already a very strong option, who's getting some slight buffs because some of his lane partners like Alistar and Braum are coming back to the meta, but he's just such an amazing counter to all of the Misfortune and Ezreal pickers. Just in general, I think the melee bot laners do have a place in the current meta. Our last YouTube question is going to be from Robin, who asked, could you explain why Pyke mid lane is in the intense category in terms of difficulty? I don't really get it. This one is actually something we had a lot of internal debate over the last couple of years on, and it partially comes down to rating the champion as a whole and not on the role that it's actually in. For example, we initially had Karthus a higher difficulty than he is now when he was a mid laner because, you know, when he was just first starting out as a jungler, we had to ask ourselves, well, he's way easier to play in that role. Should we split up the difficulties depending on which role a champion is in? Short answer is that we decided not to do that because it ends up confusing a lot of people and the upkeep on it becomes really high for a little bit of value. In Pyke's case, the difficulty of that champion is somewhat similar to that of Talon's, where the combos aren't too hard, but being extremely consistent on them, finding picks during the mid game, team fighting without inting and throwing all the game away is, you know, a little bit difficult on both those champions. It's just that Pyke's got actual skill shots to land, unlike Talon. And no, I don't care Talon mains, W does not count as a skill shot. That thing is almost impossible to miss. Now, is Pyke slightly easier from the mid lane? I actually would agree with you in that he is. He doesn't even have to look for his hooks as often as he's mostly just tap queuing to execute people, compared to support where you actually gotta hook people in to look for picks. And that means that we could likely move him to hard difficulty instead of intense in the mid lane. It's just that his learning curve overall from Riot's internal data on him has him as a champion that takes a very long time to master, so we would kind of rather keep that opinion of him rather than making an exception for a role he's probably not supposed to be played in, and Riot really doesn't like seeing him in mid lane either. Our first Instagram question comes from Abood Cutie, who asked, wait, how's Rek'Sai not there? Well, it's because Rek'Sai actually does just god-awful in low elo due to her snowball-reliant nature and non-existent late game. It's kind of similar to Olaf in a way. She currently holds below a 50% win rate and only a 3% play rate, making her, you know, just not that good overall in low elo. The reason this happens is because in low elo games, they just last longer and people tend to group up more and team fight, so when that happens, it's kind of the opposite of what Rek'Sai is looking to do, which is set up picks and then grab an objective real quick. Add on to the fact that she's literally tunnel visioned in a bracket where this is already an issue, and you can see why she might not snowball and be as reliable on ending the game quickly as she is in high elo. If you contrast that to the junglers you'll end up playing against at the very top of the low elo tier list, things like a Mumu, Master Yi, Echo, Warwick, champions who are easy enough to play, have reliable CC in some cases, and still do well grouped up in a teamfight situation, and you can see how Rek'Sai just doesn't stack up in that type of environment. That means that our last Instagram question comes from Mr. Mouthers, who asked, lol, Kha'Zix B tier question mark? There's no way. I'm sorry to have to tell you, but it's yes way. It's a pretty common misconception about the strongest champions in the low elo bracket and the jungle role specifically. This is another question that I answer a lot in the comment section from the YouTube videos, but I will answer it here as well. Team fighting junglers, junglers who scale well, junglers who can farm easily, or junglers that are easy to execute in the early game are all the strongest type of junglers for low elo specifically. You got things like a Mumu, Master Yi, Warwick, they're all perfect examples of these categories, but when you look at Kha'Zix, he's actually got none of those qualities. In fact, none of the assassin junglers do besides Echo, who's a bit of a half-blood abomination between assassin and bruiser. In fact, if you look at each assassin jungler, things like Rengar, Eve, Kha'Zix in terms of win rate in low elo, and then compare them to their win rates in high elo, you won't notice a small difference, you'll notice a huge difference. This is because mostly it's due to how reliant those champions are on snowballing, setting up picks in the mid game, or making huge flank plays during teamfights, and then closing the game out quickly before they get outscaled during the actual teamfight phase. Which is not qualities or skills that newer players are able to execute on a consistent basis, as they just haven't developed that type of game sense yet. Hence the low win rate on Bugman, which is only around 50%, as it's quite common to either snowball and then lose the game due to lack team fighting mechanics, or, you know, not snowball and then just lose the game because you're terrible from behind and provide nothing for your team, or you actually did snowball really hard and then won the game, which is only one of those three options, and people remember that one despite it not happening the most out of the other two anyways. That's it, folks. Thanks everyone for watching, and be sure to check out our other content on this channel, as well as at mobalytics.gg. As always, I'm the Napoleon of League of Legends, Adam Moriarty Isles. May the new and old solo queue gods be with you.